thanks for tuning in to Front Porch Conversations here at the Advent Christian Village. Our guest today is Steve Banks, and Steve is going to tell us a little bit about his life and so forth, and some other things too, probably.
Hope to, yep.
Good. Well, thank you for coming and joining us today.
It's my pleasure.
Tell our viewers where you were born and where you grew up.
I was born in Merced, California. It was a rural farming community, and my dad was in the military, so I grew up kind of all over. Texas, Louisiana, and Nebraska. So, and I've traveled quite a bit also.
You might talk about that more later.
Yeah.
What are some of your fond childhood memories?
I don't have any. Next question.
How old were you when you moved from California?
Well, the first time I moved I was 7 years old.
So you were old enough to remember?
Yes. Actually, I do have some childhood memories. I don't know if I can repeat them or not, but my brother and I, one time when we were 5 or 6 years old, we went to a daycare center, and we didn't like it, so we escaped. Climbed the fence and ran off, and we walked over to grandmother's house, and when we got there, she wasn't real pleased to see us, so she loaded us back up in the car and then took us back to the prison, and they separated us, and my brother and I never got to see each other again.
Oh, well, that's the only time you've been in prison, was at daycare?
Yes.
Oh, well, that's good to know.
Yeah, thank you.
Where did you end up in teenage years? Where were you living?
I went to freshman and sophomore high school in Louisiana, and then I did my junior and senior year in Omaha, Nebraska.
And where in Louisiana were you?
Barksdale, Shreveport, Bossier.
Yes, I lived there once.
Oh, good. Yeah.
For about a long time, not too long.
Yeah, Gladys Ezel lived there too.
She did.
Yeah.
My husband's company transferred us there. I thought it'd be fine because it was on the coast, Shreveport. I didn't look at the map until we were there, going there. So after high school, what happened?
After high school, I went back to Louisiana to go to college. I did my freshman and sophomore year. Then I got married and had to start supporting a family, so I quit college, started to work, was building mobile homes for about 4 or 5 years, and I decided, well, I need a better way to support my family, so I enlisted in the Air Force, and I was a air traffic controller in the Air Force.
And as an air traffic controller, do you take flight lessons and learn about flying, or is it?
When I was going to college, I started out in architectural drafting, but I changed over to aviation sciences and started flying there. My dad was in the Air Force. He was a pilot, so I've been around airplanes a lot, and had already been flying. During my semester breaks in college, my dad was stationed in England, and I would fly over space available, and then I got hooked up with a gliding club, Royal Air Force gliding club, and just had a ball. It's one of those, it's the best way to fly if you don't want to go anywhere.
So I'm not an aeronautical engineer, even close. How does a glider get up?
There are generally 2 ways. One of them is what they call a winch tow, and they just have a great big winch at the far end of the field. You hook it onto the glider, and it just starts winching you in. And as soon as you get enough airspeed, which is like 19 miles an hour or something like that, it'll start flying, and then you just crank it straight up like that until the winch starts pulling you down. then you break loose, and then you just go flying around. It gets you up 900 to 1,000 feet. Another way to do it is what they call an aero tow. And it's like water skiing. They got a big rope between one airplane and your glider. He takes off, you follow him, and then he gets you up to whatever altitude you want to be, generally around 3,000 feet. Then you cut loose, and then you try and find what they call a thermal, which is it's a round column of invisible air, and some thermals go spiral up, some of them will spiral down. And of course the wind blows them across the face of the earth at the same time. So when you find one, and usually you find it by the seat of your pants, then you just start a real tight turn and you try and stay in it. That's what all these buzzards do. That's what they're doing. So we're trying to be like a buzzard. And you just fly around till you get up as high as you want to be, and then you split out and go putting around till you get too low, and then you find another one, hopefully. And if you don't, you land.
Wherever you
wherever God tells you to. Yep.
Have you been gliding in more recently years?
No, I have not. I just have not had the time. I really enjoyed it. The gentleman that taught me how to fly was a German guy, and he would fly the mountain waves over in Germany. He had over 8,000 hours, which is quite a bit to be in any kind of airplane. But he would take his son, they would pack a sack lunch, and they'd jump in the glider, and they just fly back and forth across the mountains where the wind will come, hit the mountain, push it straight up. So that's all you got to do, just fly right on top of where the air's going up. And they do that 8 hours a day or something like that.
How long were you an air traffic controller? And was that in the military or?
Both military and the FAA. I was in the military. I was in for 5 years. Then I got out and went with the FAA. And I was in there for about a year. And then that was back in 1980.
And what happened then?
Well, it's interesting that I can put this on my resume, but I got fired by the President of the United States of America.
You and a whole bunch of other people,
yes.
Right? He didn't feel so good about the strike.
No, they would. They were not happy. But yeah, a lot of us, almost all of us, got fired. The people that went on strike, very few of them were able to be hired back, but they spent millions of dollars in legal fees. And I thought, if I got hired back, I'd work the rest of my life paying off my lawyer. Mm-hmm. So I was like, well, I'll go on to a different career. So
what was the next career?
I've done quite a few different things, and I enjoyed them all. I've had a handyman business out in California. I drove truck. I owned a couple of trucks. And then I finally got rid of them and just started driving for somebody else. I operated a carpet cleaning business, and I've run liquor stores, and I've run nightclubs and bars for about 15 years doing that. And then my dad, back in about 1993, my mother passed away, and my dad still wanted to travel. We traveled all our life. Okay. We did the Boy Scouts, and then family vacations and everything. And my dad wanted to keep on traveling, but he didn't want to go alone. So he asked me if I wanted to go, and I had just finished up with a divorce, and I thought this would be a good time to take a break. So I sold everything that I had. He sold everything that he had. We bought a motorhome, and then we took off and traveled the United States for 20 years.
So is there any place you want to go in the United States you haven't been?
I've traveled extensively in 47 of the 50 states. I've not been to Alaska. My motorhome won't flow, so Hawaii's out. And I think I drove by New Hampshire and blinked and I missed it. So yeah, I would like to do New Hampshire also.
Well, I say if you just don't even spend the night, it doesn't count.
No.
Just land in somebody's airport, doesn't count.
No. I spend lots of time. I try and spend months if possible. And I like to see what the locals do, how they live. I don't like tourist traps. I just like nature and beauty. I mean, God made all of this, and it's just so wonderful to see.
We have a beautiful country.
Yes.
Well, in a beautiful world, but
it is.
Your motorhome won't take you to some of those places.
No.
Steve, how did you get to this area, and what attracted you to the Advent Christian Village?
Actually, my dad and I we started doing volunteer work at state parks, and we'd been doing that for about 15 years. We would come down here come down south in the winter and work during the winter at a state park. We've worked most of them in this local area, and then he just got old. You know, if we're lucky enough, it'll happen to all of us. But he got old and his mind started going a little bit, and I just could not take care of him anymore. So I was looking to put him in a nursing home. The only one that was available in this area between Lake City and here was Advent Christian Village. So I checked with them, they accepted him, and I put him in there, and I was still working local state parks. Then as those jobs ended, I had found that Advent Christian Village had an RV park. And so I checked with the lodge and asked if I could stay there while my dad was a resident of Good Samaritan Center. And that's where I met Susie.
And that's Susie Hudson.
That's Susie Hudson, that's right. And so I was talking to her. She said, sure, you can stay there and everything. And then during the middle of the conversations, she was just asking, well, what do you do? And, da-da-da-da-da-da. And so I told her I do handyman work. And I said, I do whatever needs to be done to get the job done. And I just happened to look over and she was smiling from ear to ear. And I went, uh-oh, I'm in trouble now. And she hooked me in. That was the best thing that ever happened to me. Yeah. So I did volunteer work for her for quite a while. And then after my dad passed away, I hadn't really figured out what I wanted to do. And I had just fallen in love with this area and Advent Christian Village and the people. And so she wanted to hire me, and so I let her I was put on payroll, and I've been here ever since. So I've been here about 10 years, and just really enjoyed it.
Let's go back to the state parks a minute. A lot of our viewers are new to the area. Of the state parks around us, which ones would you recommend?
Oh golly, they're all unique. Swanee River State Park to the north of us is a nice little state park for RV camping. I believe they have full hookups now. I worked at Lafayette Blue Spring State Park. They have a nice underground spring that comes up, nice swimming. There is a primitive campground, but that's basic for boaters. You either boat in or hike in. Porch Spring State Park is another nice state park. It has a huge, big underground or big spring that comes up. It's a perfect place for open water scuba diving. Oh golly,
You were at Manatee Springs.
And I was at Manatee Springs, Fanning Springs. I told you, Jonathan Dickinson State Park down by north of Miami. There's Royal Springs. I don't think that's not a state park.
I don't think it is.
Yeah.
Well, for our viewers who aren't familiar, this is one of the largest area of underground cave systems.
Yes.
In the world.
Yes. Peacock Springs, which is not too far from here, is a famous place for cave diving. They have mapped out over 5 miles of underground caves and things like that you can explore if you're qualified.
Mm-hmm. I'd like to just look down and see the springs. I like to be in the water, but I don't want to be that far down. When I worked at Troy Springs, we would get a lot of classes in scuba dive, people just learning how. And we also had, there was an older guy and his son, and the older guy was in his mid-60s, and his son was in his 40s. And they would what they call free dive, which is basically you take a big breath of air and you swim all the way down to the bottom if you want to, and they'd sit down there and they'd just goof off for a little bit, and then they'd come back up. And of course, all of the bubble blowers were just freaking out that these two people could do that, and especially the older gentleman. It was quite fun. It was interesting. You were telling me earlier that you grew up going to church.
Yes. Our family was very religious. We went to Presbyterian churches. My mom always made us toe the line and everything. But you want me to tell them about my waiver?
Yeah.
I found out my mother was very strict. And when they moved to England and I moved to Louisiana to go to college, I realized that I had a lot of freedom. And with a lot of freedom comes a lot of opportunities. And Satan took one of them opportunities and just ran with me and pulled me away. And I got off the beaten path for a little over 50 years. And then a couple of years ago, I tried going on vacation, had a pretty major accident, and I tripped and fell, and I broke both of my wrists, and I broke my left kneecap. A total stranger, I was filling up, I pulled into a gas station. Total stranger came up and offered to help, and he was sent from God. He was my angel. As soon as he came up, I felt this calmness just envelop me. It was like, I tell people, it was like the Allstate, you're in good hands kind of a deal. I just had complete trust, complete faith in this gentleman. As soon as after I hit and I sat back up, I knew both wrists were broken because they had already swollen up real bad. And he came over and he says, "Can I help?" And I told him, I know I just broke both of my wrists. I said, but I want to lay down just for a second and try and figure out how to get out of this mess. Because I was up by Atlanta in my motorhome by myself, and then now I'm totally incapacitated. So I laid down, shut my eyes, and ran a gazillion scenarios through my mind on how to fix this problem. And I sat back up and I looked him straight in the eye and I go, "Nope, I don't have a clue." I said, "Would you take me or call me an ambulance?" Because I didn't know where I was. And the gentleman goes, "There's a hospital about a mile down the road. Would you like me to drive you?" I'm going, "Sure." You
didn't think a lot of options were going to pop up.
Yeah. And So I told him, well, first I need to gas up the motorhome and get it out of the gas lanes. And so I told him, I said, my wallet's in my pants. He got my wallet out. I gave him a credit card, you know. He could have run off and there wasn't anything I could do. So he gassed it up, and then I said, well, can you drive it? And he goes, I've never driven anything this big. And I said, well, just kind of keep the pointy end going forward, and, you know, everything will be okay. So I helped him park it over in the big parking lot at Sam's Club. And we got in his car and he took me to the emergency room. And this guy, I don't know, like I said, he had already started planning this forward. While I was being tended to, he had called his wife and he'd go, hey, honey, this is what has happened. And he says, I think I'm going to be driving this guy's motorhome back down to Florida. And he says, call the boy. They had a teenage son. He says, and tell him to get his car ready because he's going to follow us down so they can bring me back. So all that worked out. He drove my motorhome, never driven anything that big before, pulling my car behind, or my pickup behind it. And it was a 5-hour drive, and he did a real good job. Drove it down here. I had somebody call Susie at the lodge and say, this is what happened, I'm coming back, and can I get a couple of motel rooms for these guys? So did that. Got here, I told the guy how to set everything up and everything. Then they went in the motel room. I went to bed. Doug maybe came over and helped me also. And then the next morning, Elaine Brennan took me to the VA hospital in Lake City. And this guy, his name is Daniel, and he has either called me or texted me every week since then, over 2 years ago, just to check on me, see how things are going and everything. Just to me, it's just amazing. I mean, there's only one answer to where that came from.
And thank God you listened to God.
Yes, yes.
I recognized what it was happening.
Although God never abandoned me. There's many a times he could have, and my life would have been totally different than what it is now. But he's always protected me. And he's always tried to get me back. I just wasn't paying attention enough, so he had to slap me around pretty good
to get your attention.
You had to get through this thick skull. And he did. And so I'm going back to church again and just really enjoying what I've missed out on for 50 years.
Thank you for sharing that story.
Yeah.
Steve, I know that you work here, but you've also volunteered here a lot in the past.
Yes.
Tell us some of the ways you've volunteered at the village.
I volunteer over at the Good Samaritan Center for their Thanksgiving and Christmas dinners to help free up the staff so they can either enjoy with their families or help more with the residents that are in their charge. I help over at the dining hall when they have special events. I'll try and help them whatever I can, either serving or working in the kitchen, just help cleaning up and everything. I do drive the rideabout whenever that's needed. And on occasions, I have been asked to be the little jolly fat man in a red suit.
I think you were surprised the first time you were asked.
Yes,
right?
I was. Yes, yes, I was. And I do have a real funny thing. After the tree lighting, we were in Phillips Center, and I was sitting in the chair and greeting all the kids and all this kind of stuff, asked them what they want. Well, Mary Carter, when she was alive, she came up and she sat on my lap. And I'm kind of like, oh, okay.
She was only about 90.
Yeah, she was about 95, 96, something like that. And that kind of took me back, and so I go, and what would you like for Christmas, little girl? And she turned to me, she looked, and she goes, "I want a husband." And I went, "Okay." And then the only thing I could think of was, "You got one that can still drive at night?" She goes,
You have somebody
"I don't-
in mind?"
Yeah, I don't care. I just want a husband. And it's like, okay, so we finally got that, and it was kind of like, security. But it was wonderful.
Well, she was a character. No telling
Oh,
what she was
yes,
going to do.
what
or
a
what.
sweet lady.
Yes.
Yep.
You said there were a couple of other Santa stories.
That was basically it. I remember one time when they had the tree lighting over in front of the village lodge. I came in through the breezeway, and I've got a deep voice, and I started my ho 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 in that breezeway, and of course it echoed real bad. And I noticed that there were 2 or 3 ladies were sitting in the chairs, and they jumped about that far off. And they're like, "Uh-oh."
Uh-oh.
Yeah. And then my glasses fogged up. And I got trying to hand out candy, and it's like, "Hey, Santa can't see." So I took my glasses off, and like, Santa really can't see now.
Well, I know you had fun, and other people enjoyed doing it as well, being with you.
That's it. Life is too short to be miserable. You just try and have as much fun and just make people wonder what you're thinking.
We are going to have to wind this up right now.
Okay.
And it's been a lot of fun here being with you today and hearing your stories and sharing. And I hope you all enjoyed it, and we'll tune in again to another Front Porch Conversation.